You don't walk through these gates looking like that unless you're lost. The words landed hard against the cold night air just as the iron gates of the Blackstone estate slid halfway shut behind a line of black SUVs entering the property for the annual charity gala. Rain shimmered across the pavement in thin silver streaks while camera flashes lit up the long circular driveway like lightning. Men in tuxedos and women wrapped in designer coats stepped out beneath towering marble columns as violin music drifted faintly from somewhere inside the mansion. Then Elijah Carter walked up from the sidewalk alone. No driver. No security detail. No tailored suit announcing power before he even spoke. Just a black hoodie darkened by rainwater, faded jeans, and a pair of worn gray sneakers that had crossed more airport terminals than most people crossed city blocks. Travis Boone, head of private security for the estate, looked Elijah up and down with open disgust before stepping directly in front of the gate scanner. "Delivery staff goes around back," he said flatly. Two younger guards standing beside him laughed under their breath. One of them glanced toward the valet line and smirked. Man really thought he could walk into a place like this. Elijah stopped 3 feet from the gate. Calm. Still. His eyes moved slowly across the mansion glowing above the hill, every window warm with golden light. He had designed those windows himself 11 years earlier. Every stone. Every staircase. Every inch of the estate sitting beyond those gates existed because he built it. Yet none of the men standing in front of him recognized him. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Elijah Carter. Travis folded his arms tighter against the rain. You deaf or something, he snapped. Turn around and leave before this becomes a problem. Elijah didn't blink. Open the gate, he said quietly. Something about his calmness irritated Travis instantly. It wasn't fear. It wasn't apology. It was the kind of stillness powerful people carried without trying. But Travis mistook silence for weakness the same way men like him always did. A white couple wearing black tie attire approached moments later from the opposite sidewalk. Travis smiled immediately and stepped aside without checking a single ID. Evening, folks. Enjoy the gala. Elijah watched the gates swing open for them, then close again directly in his face. One of the guards chuckled. Funny how that works. Up near the front entrance, several guests had already started noticing the confrontation below the hill. Phones slowly lifted. Conversation softened. A young Latina receptionist standing inside the security booth glanced nervously between Elijah and the monitor on her desk. Her name tag read Sofia Ramirez. She stared at Elijah a second too long before turning quickly back toward her computer. Travis noticed. Don't bother checking, he muttered. Guy's obviously fishing for attention. Elijah slipped one hand into his pocket and looked toward the mansion again as rain collected along the edge of his hood. Somewhere inside those walls, politicians, athletes, and CEOs were drinking champagne beneath chandeliers worth more than most houses in America. And outside the gate, the man who owned all of it was being treated like he didn't belong on the sidewalk. Then Travis took one step closer and pointed toward the street. Last warning, he said coldly. Walk away from this property. Elijah finally looked him directly in the eye. His voice stayed low. Controlled. Dangerous in the quietest possible way. You should be very careful telling a man to leave his own home. Rain tapped softly against the steel gate while silence stretched between Elijah Carter and the 3 guards blocking his entrance. Travis Boone stared at him with the kind of confidence that only came from believing the system would always back you no matter how wrong you were. Behind them, the mansion glowed against the hillside like a private kingdom floating above the city. Music drifted through the night air. Laughter echoed faintly from the terrace. Wealth moved freely inside those walls. But outside the gate, judgment stood armed with a Flashlight and a badge. Travis shook his head slowly. You really expect me to believe this place belongs to you? He asked. One of the younger guards snorted. Man probably saw the address online and thought he could sneak into a celebrity party. Elijah remained still beneath the rain. His hoodie clung darker against his shoulders now, but his expression never changed. He had spent 30 years learning that anger made people comfortable. Calmness unsettled them. And right now Travis Boone was becoming more unsettled by the second. Up inside the security booth, Sofia Ramirez continued staring at her monitor. Her fingers hovered uncertainly above the keyboard. Something about the face standing outside the gate felt familiar. Not from social media. Not from television. From somewhere deeper inside the system itself. She quietly opened the resident authorization database while Travis kept talking. You people always think confidence can replace credentials, he said coldly. That works somewhere else. Not here. Elijah finally spoke. You should verify before embarrassing yourself further. Travis laughed openly this time. Embarrassing myself? He stepped closer beneath the gate light. You walked up to a $20 million estate in a sweatshirt looking like you slept in a rental car. Another black SUV rolled toward the entrance behind Elijah. Travis immediately straightened his posture and signaled the gates open halfway. A white man in an expensive navy tuxedo leaned out the passenger window holding a crystal glass of champagne. Everything good here? He asked casually. Travis nodded fast. Just handling a trespass issue, sir. The man barely glanced at Elijah before the vehicle rolled through the gates without another question. Elijah watched the headlights disappear up the curved driveway. Then he looked back toward Travis. Interesting policy, he said quietly. Travis folded his arms tighter. Policy works just fine. But the truth was it did not. Not tonight. Because Elijah Carter had not returned home unexpectedly. He had returned intentionally. 3 months earlier, anonymous complaints had started reaching executive offices connected to Blackstone estates. Guests describing profiling. Delivery drivers humiliated at the gates. Residents complaining privately about aggressive security behavior toward black visitors. Each report disappeared after internal review. Each explanation sounded cleaner on paper than in reality. Elijah had read every single one himself during a private flight from Chicago 2 nights earlier. And now he stood in the rain listening to the exact same tone hidden between every complaint line. Sophia suddenly looked up sharply from inside the booth. Her eyes widened for half a second as something flashed across her screen. Owner profile clearance. Executive override access. Elijah Carter. Her stomach dropped instantly. She opened her mouth carefully. Travis. I think maybe we should. Travis cut her off without even turning around. Stay focused on your station. Sophia hesitated. The monitor beside her displayed Elijah's photograph clearly now beside a gold authorization seal reserved only for primary ownership. She looked back through the rain toward the man standing outside the gates while the guards continued mocking him like he was invisible. Elijah noticed her expression immediately. And for the first time that night, the corner of his mouth moved slightly. Not a smile. Just recognition. Because someone inside the system had finally started paying attention. The rain started falling harder now, soft at first, then steady enough to blur the lights climbing the long driveway toward the mansion. Travis Boone wiped water from his jacket sleeve and looked irritated that Elijah Carter still had not moved an inch. Most people backed down once security raised their voice. Most people apologized. Explained themselves. Tried to prove they belonged. Elijah did none of that. He simply stood there like the storm itself belonged to him. Travis pointed toward the sidewalk again. You have about 10 seconds before I call County Patrol, he warned. You are standing on private property. Elijah looked past him toward the mansion windows glowing gold against the dark hills. Yes, he said quietly. I know. The younger guards exchanged looks and laughed again. One of them lifted a flashlight and deliberately swept the beam across Elijah's hoodie and sneakers. This is exactly why rich neighborhoods need stronger gate control, he muttered. Anybody can walk up pretending these days. Up inside the booth, Sofia Ramirez felt her chest tighten. The owner file was still open on her screen. Elijah Carter, founder and majority owner of Blackstone Estates Development Group. Net worth listed in the billions. Emergency access clearance unrestricted. The same man Travis was threatening to remove from his own property was literally the highest authority in the entire system. Sofia swallowed hard. Travis, she said more firmly this time. I think there has been a mistake. Travis did not even turn around. The only mistake here is this guy thinking he can bluff his way into a private event. Another black luxury sedan approached the gate. Travis instantly changed tone again. Evening, ma'am, he said politely while waving the vehicle through. A blonde woman wearing diamonds glanced briefly toward Elijah before the car rolled past. Her expression carried the same assumption everyone else seemed to make tonight. Wrong place. Wrong clothes. Wrong skin color. Elijah noticed every single look. He always did. At 19, he had walked into a luxury watch store in downtown Atlanta wearing his college basketball warm-ups and been followed through 3 floors by security until he finally left without saying a word. At 26, a realtor once handed him brochures for more affordable neighborhoods, while standing in front of a 40,000 square foot property he was already prepared to buy in cash. Different cities. Different faces. Same energy. Same quiet belief that wealth looked one way and one way only. Travis stepped closer again, growing bolder each minute. The crowd behind him grew larger. Several gala guests had started gathering near the entrance stairs watching the confrontation from above. Phones glowed faintly in the dark. Someone whispered, "Who is that?" Another voice answered, "Probably some guy trying to sneak into the party." Travis enjoyed the audience. Power always grew louder when it had spectators. "Show me identification," he demanded. Elijah tilted his head slightly. "You did not ask the last 6 people for identification." Travis smirked. The last 6 people looked like they belonged here. The air seemed to freeze for a second after that sentence landed. Even one of the younger guards shifted awkwardly. Sofia looked horrified inside the booth. Elijah remained completely still, but something changed behind his eyes. Not anger. Not surprise. Recognition. Because there it was. Finally spoken out loud. Travis must have realized it too because he quickly added, "I mean dressed appropriately for a private event." But it was too late. The truth had already escaped the room. Then Sofia made a decision that would change everything. She stepped out of the security booth holding a tablet against her chest. Rain immediately soaked her uniform sleeves as she walked toward Travis carefully. "Sir," she said quietly. "I really think you need to see this." Travis looked annoyed before glancing toward the screen she was holding. And for the first time all night, his confidence flickered. Sofia Ramirez held the tablet carefully beneath the rain while Travis Boone stared down at the glowing screen with growing irritation. For a brief second his eyes narrowed at the name displayed across the authorization page. Then pride took over where logic should have stepped in. He scoffed and pushed the tablet slightly downward with the back of his hand. "Anybody can fake a profile screen," he snapped. Sofia blinked in disbelief. "It is connected directly to the resident database," she said carefully. "This is owner-level clearance." Travis looked back toward Elijah Carter standing silently outside the gate and laughed once under his breath. "That man?" he asked. "You really think the owner of this estate walks home alone in a soaked hoodie?" The younger guards smirked immediately, eager to stay on the winning side of authority. One of them folded his arms and shook his head. No billionaire is showing up looking like he missed the bus. Elijah listened quietly while rainwater slid from the edge of his hood onto the pavement below. Behind him, another cluster of guests had gathered near the entrance staircase farther up the hill. Their conversations had shifted completely now. Nobody was talking about the charity gala anymore. Every eye was fixed on the gates. Every phone pointed downward toward the scene unfolding below. A man near the valet line whispered, "Something feels off." A woman beside him answered softly, "The security team is pushing way too hard." Travis sensed the shift immediately and grew louder to regain control. "Sir," he called toward Elijah with exaggerated patience, "I am going to ask one final time for you to leave voluntarily." Elijah tilted his head slightly. "And if I do not?" Travis smiled thinly. "Then we escalate." The word hung cold in the rain. Sophia looked genuinely nervous now. "Travis, please," she whispered. "At least call central management before this goes further." Travis turned sharply toward her. "You are new here, so let me help you understand something," he said. "People like him count on hesitation. They act calm. They act confident. Then they find a way inside." Elijah finally spoke again, his voice low enough that everyone had to lean in to hear it. "You keep saying people like him." Travis froze for half a second. Just enough for everyone watching to notice. The younger guards suddenly looked less comfortable. Even the guests standing above the driveway seemed to lean closer beneath the mansion lights. Travis cleared his throat quickly. "I mean trespassers," he corrected. "Do not twist my words." But the damage was already done. Elijah stepped one pace closer to the gate scanner. Calm. Measured. Controlled. "You decided who belonged here before you asked a single question," he said quietly. "That was your first mistake." The rain intensified again, drumming softly against the metal gates and security booth windows. Somewhere inside the mansion ballroom, the orchestra music stopped abruptly as more guests drifted toward the terrace overlooking the driveway. The confrontation had become the event now. Sophia glanced back at the tablet in her hands. The system still displayed the same authorization seal. She swallowed hard before speaking louder this time. "His biometric profile matches the estate owner file exactly." Silence hit the gate area instantly. One of the guards looked at Travis uncertainly. "Maybe we should verify with upper management." Travis refused to lose ground. "No," he snapped immediately. "This is exactly how scams work." He pointed directly at Elijah now. "He probably found old company photos online." Elijah almost smiled at that. Almost. Then a sleek black sedan rolled slowly down the driveway from the mansion itself and stopped near the gates. Every head turned. The driver stepped out holding an umbrella before quickly opening the rear passenger door. A sharply dressed older man climbed out wearing a charcoal suit and silver tie. The moment he saw Elijah standing outside the gate in the rain, his face drained of color. The older man stepped out beneath the umbrella with the stiff posture of someone who understood immediately that disaster was unfolding in real time. His name was Harold Whitmore, chairman of the Blackstone Charity Board and one of the few executives personally invited into Elijah Carter's private circle. The moment his eyes landed on Elijah standing outside the gates in the rain, his expression shifted from confusion to absolute alarm. "Oh my God," he muttered under his breath. Travis Boone noticed the reaction instantly and moved forward before Harold could speak. "Sir, please remain near your vehicle," Travis said quickly. "We are handling an unauthorized individual." Harold looked at him like he had just spoken another language. "Unauthorized," he repeated slowly. Elijah remained calm, hands still in his hoodie pockets while rain tapped softly across the black sedan beside them. The entire driveway had fallen nearly silent now. Guests lined the terrace railings above. Valets had stopped moving vehicles. Even the musicians inside the mansion ballroom stood near the windows watching. Travis sensed control slipping away and doubled down harder. This individual attempted to gain access using false credentials, he announced loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "We are following security protocol." Harold stared at him in disbelief. Then he looked toward Elijah carefully. "Sir," he began quietly. Elijah stopped him with the smallest shake of his head. "Not yet." Harold understood immediately. The realization hit him all at once. Elijah had not arrived unnoticed by accident. This was intentional. A test. And every person at those gates was failing it publicly. Sofia Ramirez held the tablet tighter against her chest while one of the younger guards shifted nervously beside Travis. "Maybe we should call corporate operations," the guard whispered. Travis snapped without taking his eyes off Elijah. "I am corporate operations tonight." That sentence landed badly. Even some guests above the driveway exchanged uncomfortable looks. Elijah studied Travis silently for another second before speaking. "You built your entire opinion of me in less than 30 seconds, he said calmly. "No verification. No questions. Just assumptions." Travis scoffed. "I trust my instincts." Elijah nodded once. "That is the problem." The rain softened briefly as thunder rolled somewhere far beyond the hills. For a moment the only sound was water dripping from the gates and distant music echoing through the mansion halls. Then Travis made the mistake that changed everything. He stepped directly in front of Elijah and placed one hand firmly against Elijah's chest to push him back from the scanner line. It was not violent. Not dramatic. But the entire atmosphere shifted instantly the moment contact happened. Phones rose higher across the terrace. Sophia gasped softly. Harold Whitmore closed his eyes for half a second like he already knew careers had just ended. Elijah looked down slowly at the hand resting against his hoodie. His expression never changed. But something colder entered the air around him. At 13 years old, Elijah remembered standing outside an upscale department store in Charlotte while his mother worked a late cleaning shift inside the building after hours. A security guard had stopped him near the entrance and told him kids from neighborhoods like his usually caused trouble. Elijah still remembered the embarrassment on his mother's face when she walked outside and saw strangers staring at her son like he did not belong near the building where she worked every night. 28 years later, standing outside the mansion he owned, the feeling returned exactly the same. Not anger. Something sharper. Recognition. Elijah slowly lifted his eyes back toward Travis. "Take your hand off me," he said quietly. Travis hesitated just long enough to reveal uncertainty for the first time all night. But pride would not let him back down now. "Or what?" he asked. Elijah's voice stayed low. Controlled. Certain. "Or you are about to discover how expensive disrespect can become." Travis Boone slowly removed his hand from Elijah Carter's chest, but the damage had already settled across the driveway like smoke after a fire. Every guest watching from the terrace had seen it. Every phone camera remained raised. Even the younger guard standing beside Travis no longer looked certain about anything. The rain eased into a cold mist drifting through the gate lights while silence pressed against the estate from every direction. Harold Whitmore stepped forward carefully beneath his umbrella. "Travis," he said in a tight voice, "I strongly suggest you stop this right now." But Travis was too deep into his own authority to retreat gracefully. Men like him rarely realized the moment they crossed the line until the ground disappeared underneath them. He straightened his jacket and forced a laugh toward the crowd above the driveway. "Everybody calm down," he announced loudly. "This is exactly why we have security procedures." Elijah looked at him quietly. "Security procedures did not tell you to humiliate me." Travis ignored him completely and turned toward one of the guards. "Call County Patrol," he ordered. "Tell them we have an aggressive trespassing situation." Sofia Ramirez looked horrified. "Aggressive?" she repeated softly. "He has not raised his voice once." Travis spun toward her instantly. "Stay in your lane." The words snapped through the rain sharp enough to make her step backward. But Elijah noticed something important then. Sophia did not lower her eyes anymore. Fear was still there, but now it was fighting with conscience. The crowd above the driveway continued growing. Guests wrapped in formal coats lined the stone railings overlooking the gate. Some whispered to each other. Others openly filmed. "Now." One older man near the entrance stairs muttered, "This feels wrong." A woman beside him answered quietly, "Because it is." Elijah reached into his hoodie pocket slowly and pulled out his phone. The motion alone made one of the guards tense instinctively. Travis pointed immediately. "Do not try anything stupid." Elijah barely looked at him. He pressed one number and lifted the phone calmly to his ear. The line connected almost instantly. "Vanessa," Elijah said quietly. Inside a downtown operations tower 15 miles away, Vanessa Reed sat upright in her office chair the moment she heard his voice. She had worked beside Elijah Carter for 12 years and knew the difference between irritation and danger within 2 words. "I am here," she answered immediately. Elijah's eyes never left Travis. "Initiate Blackstone Protocol." The air seemed to change around those words. Vanessa did not hesitate. "Understood," she replied. "Level?" Elijah glanced once toward the mansion gates glowing beneath the rain. "Full authorization." Vanessa's keyboard clicks echoed faintly through the phone line. "Activating now." Travis scoffed loudly. "You really expect anyone here to believe you run this place?" Elijah slid the phone calmly back into his pocket. "No," he answered softly. "I expect them to watch what happens next." Up inside the mansion ballroom, chandeliers suddenly flickered once. Music stopped mid-song. Several giant digital display panels near the charity stage blinked black before resetting simultaneously. Guests inside the estate turned in confusion as security monitors across the property began refreshing all at once. At the gate booth, Sophia's tablet emitted a sharp notification sound. Then another. Then 5 more in rapid succession. Her eyes widened as new system messages flooded the screen. Executive override enabled. Estate access authority reassigned. Security audit in progress. One of the younger guards looked down at his own device suddenly. Travis," he whispered nervously. Travis grabbed the handheld scanner from him aggressively. The screen flashed red across the center. "Access limited." He frowned and tried again harder like force could change. The answer. Same result. Red. Another guard checked his radio. Static. Then complete silence. Above them, guests started murmuring louder as lights along the mansion driveway slowly illuminated one by one in a perfect line leading directly toward Elijah Carter standing outside the gates in the rain. The long driveway lights continued turning on one after another like a runway leading home. White stone pillars glowed beneath the rain while the massive iron gates behind Travis Boone emitted a low mechanical hum. Guests standing above the entrance railings fell completely silent now. Nobody understood exactly what was happening yet, but everyone felt the same thing at once. The power in the situation had shifted. Travis looked down at the handheld scanner again, pressing buttons harder with growing frustration. Red warning messages continued flashing across the screen. Access restricted. Security authority suspended pending review. "This system is glitching," he muttered sharply. One of the younger guards checked his earpiece again. Nothing. The private security communication network was completely dead. Sofia Ramirez stared at her tablet with wide eyes as new alerts continued appearing across every page. Owner override confirmed. Executive control reinstated. Facial recognition match, Elijah Carter. 99.98% verified. Her breathing slowed for a moment as the reality finally settled fully into place. Every instinct she ignored earlier had been right. Harold Whitmore stepped forward beneath the umbrella again, his face tense with second-hand embarrassment. "Travis," he said quietly, "you need to stop talking." But Travis Boone was already unraveling under the weight of public humiliation. Pride made him reckless. "No," he snapped loudly enough for the crowd to hear. "This is some kind of setup." Elijah Carter stood perfectly still in front of the gate scanner while rain drifted softly around him. "You still think this is about me proving something to you," he said calmly. "It never was." Then it happened. Every screen across the estate flickered simultaneously. The digital display panels inside the ballroom reset. The security booth. Monitors turned black for half a second before a silver crest slowly appeared across every camera feed connected to Blackstone Estate. Guests inside the mansion stopped moving entirely. Valets froze beside parked luxury cars. Even the kitchen staff standing near the service entrance turned toward the monitors mounted along the walls. A calm artificial voice echoed through hidden speakers across the entire property. "Primary homeowner recognized." The gates unlocked with a heavy metallic click. "Welcome home, Mr. Elijah Carter." Silence hit the estate so hard it almost felt physical. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Travis Boone's face lost color instantly. One of the younger guards actually stepped backward. Phones rose higher all across the terrace as guests realized they were witnessing the collapse of a man who had spent the last 20 minutes humiliating the owner of the estate to his face. Elijah finally stepped forward as the iron gates slowly opened inward before him. The rain softened to a mist around his shoulders while the driveway lights reflected beneath his sneakers like polished glass. Harold Whitmore lowered his head slightly out of respect as Elijah passed beside him. Sofia Ramirez looked like she might faint. Travis stared at Elijah with panic beginning to crack through his expression for the first time all night. "Wait," he stammered. You are Mr. Carter." Elijah stopped just inside the gates and turned slowly back toward him. Calm. Controlled. Untouchable. "You called me a trespasser," he said quietly. "At the house I built." Nobody said a word. The silence around that sentence felt heavier than shouting ever could. Travis opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Every smug comment. Every assumption. Every order he barked into the rain now hung around him like evidence. Elijah glanced briefly toward the guests watching from above. Some looked ashamed. Others looked stunned. A few lowered their phones entirely. Then Elijah looked back at Travis one final time. "The problem was never that you did not know who I was," he said softly. "The problem is how you treated someone you thought did not matter." The rain had nearly stopped by the time the full weight of reality settled over the estate. Travis Boone stood frozen just outside the open gates while every person watching silently recalculated the last 20 minutes in their minds. The mocking comments. The accusations. The hand against Elijah Carter's chest. All of it now looked different under the cold white glow of the driveway lights. Smaller. Uglier. One of the younger guards slowly removed his earpiece and looked down at the ground like he suddenly wanted to disappear into it. Then the phones started buzzing. One after another. Sharp notification sounds echoed through the gate area as security staff checked their screens with growing panic. The first guard swallowed hard. "My access is gone," he whispered. Another looked pale beneath the estate lights. "Mine too." Travis grabbed his own phone instantly. His face tightened the second he unlocked it. Across the screen sat a black notification banner stamped with the silver Blackstone crest. Security authority terminated. Access revoked effective immediately. A second message appeared beneath it. Pending formal review for professional misconduct. Travis stared at the words as if refusing to understand them could somehow undo them. "No," he muttered under his breath. "No, this is insane." Harold Whitmore looked exhausted. This is consequences, he said quietly. Above the driveway, murmurs spread through the gathered guests. Some shook their heads openly now. Others lowered their phones with embarrassment after realizing they had stood watching while a billionaire homeowner was profiled at his own gate simply because he arrived dressed like an ordinary man. Elijah Carter remained calm through all of it. That was the part unsettling everyone most. He was not yelling. Not threatening. Not humiliating anyone back. He simply stood there while the system corrected itself around him. Sofia Ramirez glanced down at her tablet again as new messages flooded the screen. Full security audit initiated. Surveillance footage archived. Incident review forwarded to executive operations. Then came another alert. Personnel suspension pending executive confirmation. Sofia looked toward Travis slowly. He saw the expression on her face and understood immediately. The younger guards backed farther away from him now, instinctively distancing themselves from the man who had led them into disaster. Travis looked toward Elijah desperately. "Mr. Carter," he said quickly, "listen, this whole thing was just a misunderstanding." Elijah said nothing. Travis stepped forward another pace. "We were only trying to protect the property." Elijah finally looked at him directly. "You were protecting an image," he replied quietly. "Not the property." The sentence landed harder than shouting ever could. One of the guards removed his security badge slowly and slipped it into his pocket without speaking. Another rubbed both hands over his face in panic. "I told you we should have verified," he muttered toward Travis under his breath. But the collapse was already complete. Then the county patrol vehicles arrived at the bottom of the hill with flashing lights reflecting softly against the wet pavement. 2 deputies stepped out calmly, expecting some kind of trespassing disturbance. Travis immediately turned toward them with relief flooding his face. "Officers," he started quickly, "there has been confusion tonight." But before he could continue, one deputy glanced at Elijah Carter and stopped cold. Recognition crossed his face instantly. "Sir," the deputy said respectfully toward Elijah, "is there a problem here?" Silence swallowed Travis whole. The younger guards looked away entirely now. Guests on the terrace openly whispered among themselves. One woman near the entrance stairs shook her head slowly and said, "They really tried to remove the owner from his own home." Travis looked like a man watching the floor disappear beneath him inch by inch. Then his voice cracked for the first time all night. "Please," he said quietly toward Elijah. "Do not destroy my career over this." Elijah studied him for a long moment while rainwater continued dripping softly from the gates beside them. "You already did that yourself," he answered. The flashing patrol lights faded into the background as silence settled across Blackstone Estate one final time. Travis Boone stood near the open gates. Looking smaller than he had an hour earlier, his authority stripped away piece by piece beneath the same lights he once controlled. The younger guards remained frozen beside the security booth, unsure whether to leave, apologize, or disappear completely. Above them, guests lined the terrace in absolute silence, their expensive coats and champagne glasses suddenly meaningless against the weight of what they had just witnessed. Elijah Carter looked up the long driveway toward the mansion standing above the hill. Warm light poured from every window. Music inside had stopped completely now. Nobody was celebrating anymore. The estate itself felt different somehow. Quieter. Honest. Harold Whitmore stepped beside Elijah carefully. "The board is already requesting an emergency review by morning," he said softly. "This will spread fast." Elijah nodded once without emotion. "It should." One of the deputies glanced toward Travis and then back toward Elijah. "Would you like us to remove anyone from the property tonight, sir?" Travis lowered his eyes immediately. Fear had finally replaced ego completely. But Elijah shook his head calmly. "No," he answered. "They already removed themselves." The word settled over the driveway like judgment. Sofia Ramirez stood near the gate booth still holding the tablet against her chest. Rainwater darkened the edges of her sleeves, but she no longer looked nervous. She looked awake. Elijah turned toward her. "You spoke up when it mattered," he said quietly. Sofia swallowed hard. "I almost did not," she admitted. "But you did." Her eyes lowered for a second as emotion crossed her face. Because she understood exactly what he meant. Courage rarely arrived loudly. Most times it arrived shaking. One of the younger guards finally stepped forward carefully. "Mr. Carter," he said quietly, "I should have stopped this earlier." Elijah studied him for a moment before answering. The easiest time to stop injustice is before everyone else notices it. The guard nodded slowly, unable to meet his eyes afterward. Across the terrace, several guests began lowering their phones one by one. Some looked ashamed they had watched silently for so long. Others looked thoughtful, as if the night had exposed something uncomfortable inside themselves too. Elijah had seen that expression before. It was the face people made when prejudice stopped feeling abstract and became personal. Travis looked toward Elijah again desperately. "Please," he said quietly. "I have a family. I made a mistake." Elijah walked a few slow steps closer until they stood only feet apart beneath the glowing gate lights. "No," Elijah said calmly. "A mistake is entering the wrong code. Forgetting a name. Misreading a schedule." Travis's breathing tightened. Elijah continued softly, "What you did tonight was make a decision about someone's worth before learning a single fact about them." Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. Even the wind through the trees seemed quieter now. Elijah glanced briefly toward the mansion above them before looking back at Travis one last time. "You saw a black man in ordinary clothes and decided he could not possibly belong in a place like this," he said. "That belief existed long before I arrived tonight." Travis said nothing because there was nothing left to say. Elijah turned away from the gates and began walking slowly up the long illuminated driveway toward the mansion. Guests standing along the terrace instinctively stepped aside as he approached. Some nodded respectfully. Others simply watched in silence. The massive front doors opened before him automatically, warm light spilling across the stone steps. Just before entering, Elijah stopped briefly and looked back down toward the gates where security once stood certain of their power. "I did not raise my voice tonight," he said calmly. "I raised the standard." Then he stepped inside his home as the doors closed slowly behind him and the estate finally fell silent.